Happy Wednesday. I hope everyone's having a good week so far and everyone is staying out of the ridiculous heat or staying safe if you are experiencing any of the flooding that is going on. Stay safe, stay cool. Um, but I wanted to jump in and talk about the Hulu series Dopesick. I am doing a rewatch of actually this will probably be my third time watching it. I thoroughly have enjoyed every time I've watched it because when you watch something, you pick up on another thing that you may not have noticed the first time that you watched it. It does delve into the opioid crisis, and Netflix released a series around the same time called Painkiller, and I did watch that one too. But as far as if I had to pick which one I enjoyed the most, I would say Dopesick just because I felt like it truly grappled all of the different positions and the different socio-economical effects and just the personal lives of people that I would assume to be affected. And as far as the background and things that people are everyday people, I think they touch that very well. Sometimes I feel like Hollywood makes things a little too glossy and glammed over, but Dopesick does a really good job. It takes place in West Virginia, which I mean, all of Appalachia was affected by the opioid crisis, but West Virginia, from all accounts, seems to be ground zero because a lot of the advertisement and the push for sales of Oxycontin when it came to market was more blue collar, hardworking areas like coal miners and railroad workers, people that are doing heavy lifting and are prone to injury. So, Dopesick was released in October of 2021 and it had 8 episodes. And like I said, it gets into the opioid crisis. And I enjoy the time hop of some shows or series that you watch or films. They tend to get you lost in the time hop, but it was very realistic. So wherever they time hop back to was a direct correlation of the moment and what was going on. Dopesick did receive positive reviews. Its most notable cast members, Michael Keaton and Caitlin Dever, at the 74th Primetime Emmy Award. So they received 14 nominations, including an Outstanding Limited or Anthology Series. And let's see, and Keaton and Dever, the Peter Sandberg and Michael Stahlberg and Will Potler and Mike Winningham, they ended up winning the outstanding lead, or they were nominated for outstanding lead actor in a limited anthology series or movie. So it did very well. So the cast was Michael Keaton as Dr. Samuel Phoenix, who ends up moving to the town in West Virginia with his wife, who ultimately passes away from her battle with cancer. Peter Sarsgaard as Rick Mountcastle, Michael Stahlberg as Richard Sackle. He actually did a really good job when I realized who that was. They did a good job with his makeup and manipulating like his face and everything for the series. Will Potler as Bill Cutler, John Hugenacre as Randy Westmeyer, Caitlin Dever as Betsy Malum, and Rosario Dawson as Bridget Meyer. Um, so it begins at the very beginning of the whole creation of Oxycontin. The Sackler family was looking for their moneymaker and how to avoid any issues with licensing and getting approval from the FDA. And they ultimately get approval and they have released Oxycontin as a Schedule 2 narcotic, which means that it's controlled, but not as highly as what a Schedule 1 narcotic would be. So they really push marketing and as far as trying to get the medication in the hands of physicians and to make sure that pharmaceutical reps are being pushy with the providers as far as, and they were not above, I mean, it's bribery at the end of the day. If you are going into medical offices, and I feel like, yes, and I've worked in a medical office, pharmaceutical reps were definitely a thing during my tenure in the medical field, but not as bad as these pharmaceutical reps. And especially in the Netflix um, documentary Painkiller, they really like did it up and they showed how far these pharmaceutical reps were willing to go to sell prescriptions or get doctors to prescribe prescriptions. Um, so Dr. Hannix or Phoenix, apologies, Michael Keaton's character is even offered weekends out of town for conventions where they pretty much just give you giveaways, goodie bags, you eat very well, expensive meals, and you sit and everybody kind of discuss and soundboards off of one another as far as prescribing and why it should be prescribed. So in the beginning, Dr. Phoenix was reluctant to prescribe it because just historically, this just does not sound like a good idea to prescribe this, especially to young people. But I'm sorry, Betsy, whose character is struggling with a lot of things already. She comes from an uber religious family and she is struggling with her sexuality and not necessarily struggling. She knows that she is attracted to women, but she fears what will happen if she tries to come out to her parents. And she has a love interest who wants to move away. So, through the series in the beginning, she is struggling with moving away. And then she's struggling with a back injury because she works in the mines with her father, who is very proud of her and the fact that she's able to hold her own and get work done. And Betsy is torn because she really loves working in the mine, but she also knows that she can't live in her truth with her parents knowing about it, or they will completely disown her. And you definitely get that takeaway from a dinner conversation that they have about someone who lived in their town who had passed away, and she was a lesbian. And Dr. Phoenix kind of, or not kind of, he's trying to coach Betsy through all the things that she's going through while he is trying to treat her pain. And he is ultimately setting her up for failure and he is prescribing her something that is going to ultimately ruin both of their lives and without knowing it. And it's really sad when you get further into the series that he discussed that he delivered so many children in the town and how many are hooked on narcotics or hooked on Oxycontin. So Dr. Phoenix if just is that normal small town doctor taking calls all through the middle of the night, any time of day. He's there for you. He even makes a house call. It's really cute. His receptionist offers him a invite to her family get together and he says he has plans and she's like yeah right. Well, his plans were to check on one of his patients who is obviously suffering from Alzheimer's, dementia, some type of memory loss decline, and he just goes to check on her to make sure she is taking her medication. So it was really like heartwarming in the beginning to see the thread of all of the people in the community because the same lady is having dinner with Betsy and her family when the conversation about the woman comes up. So it's just community, everyone looking out for everyone, and it's just like sad because you know what is getting ready to happen. So eventually, Betsy's back injury does get better, and Dr. Phoenix is trying to lo- do what he's supposed to do, wean her off the medication. And she initially tries, but she can't because opioids, from all accounts and everything that I've under or what I understand, it's not just a regular, you can just do this cold turkey. It's going to be hard. And it's just sad how many people have lost their lives and lost their family and lost so much to opioid addiction. And so yeah. So the initial labeling from 1995 to 2001 was originally approved in December of 1995, and the label stated that the extended release formation provided 12 hours of pain relief. However, it led to widespread abuse because patients learned that they could crush the tablet and get a much more higher high from snorting the medication instead. So and just to get the immediate effects. So the labeling updates and the black box warning, they had been initiated from 2001 to 2010 because the FDA eventually was pressured into doing it as they should have done it. Um so, and then eventually we do get a reformulated label in 2010 to present. And that means that the FDA approved a reformulated version of Oxycontin. And it just means that the physical properties are meant to make the pill difficult to crush, break up, or dissolve. Um, but already the damage had been done by the time all these actions had been taken. Because also, what they were doing is they eventually prescribed an 80 milligram version of Oxycontin. I'm like, who is taking this? But this is what happens. People were taking the 20 milligrams and they were taking it as directed, but your body becomes used to the dosage that you're being prescribed and you eventually need more. So, all the different things and shortcuts that they took to keep Oxycontin on the market and to keep poisoning communities is absolutely, it's just horrible. By episode 5, we end up starting to see the cracks are starting to happen because we are at the point we're at a full-blown epidemic. People are not doing okay. Dr. Phoenix himself is in the throes of addiction, is about to lose everything because he had a car accident and cracked a rib, and he was prescribed Oxycontin while in the emergency room, and he ends up ultimately being addicted, and he starts looping his patients into a scheme to ultimately get their hands on as much Oxycontin as they can get. And then episode 6, Purdue was celebrating $1 billion in Oxycontin sales. Um, and the attorney for Maine, his name was Jay McCluskey. He sent out a letter regarding Oxycontin's diversion and the abuse to all doctors in the state. And then they end up meeting with Sackler, and just it's just I'm not going to get into it because I will lose my mind. It's just a big gaslight from there, dealing anything to do with Richard Sackler. Everything I've seen, it's just no ownership, no responsibility for all the lives that you're responsible for, the blood money, pretty much. Um, and then episode 7, the black box warning, that's when we finally get into the black box warnings. And then Dr. Phoenix has lost it all. He's going to, or he starts methadone to help with his addiction. But that eventually casts over to when he tries to get his medical license back, because you cannot be on, well, according to the series, you cannot be currently taking methadone and be a licensed prescriber. Betsy is just doing horrible. It's really sad. She is in the throes of addiction. She is selling her mom's jewelry down to like the last of these irreplaceable pieces. And from the impression I got, it must have been from like her grandmother, some type of family heirloom. It gets so bad that Betsy ends up eventually selling herself. And Dr. Phoenix, while getting clean, he tries to rectify. And I really love his character because his character does take responsibility for his actions and the damage that he himself has done, even though he is a victim and he could have played the victim card. But he tries to round up the people in town that he can, and he tries to go get everybody treatment and tries to get everybody help, which he does. And he does eventually get his medical license back. The sad part about it is that unfortunately Betsy becomes so deep into her addiction, she eventually turns to heroin to help keep her from getting dope sick, because ultimately that's what everyone is chasing. They're trying to avoid the dope sickness. Even in one episode, they go as far as to pushing a theory called pseudo addiction, which pretty much makes it sound like the pain that the patients are experiencing is in their head, and that is not the case at all. You all release this poison and then are ruining people's lives and making them lose everything. They even have, so going back earlier into the series, the investigators are going back and discussing the advertisement for Oxycontin. So, and this is when we realize there's a big problem. Rosario Dawson's character, she's trying to whistleblow and discuss that if you notice in West Virginia, the quick progression of children being surrendered to foster care, the amount of sex work, because people are obviously exchanging sexual favors as a form of survival and to fund their dependence on Oxycontin, theft, and just overall crime. And she was ignored. And that's the one thing that throughout the series you notice the amount of people that just kept just dropping the buck and just kept ignoring that we are on the verge of a crisis before it was just too late. So in the Oxycontin videos, they noticed that the reference Oxycontin is never used. So Oxycontin is, it's written and printed on the video, but no one is saying Oxycontin. And we definitely later find out that was a legal tactic to protect themselves. So when the investigators actually went and talked to all these people that were in the video, they're all addicted to drugs, for the exception of one woman that they talked to. And she actually went cold turkey and quit. But she only quit because I hats off to that woman. She just had the willpower and the drive. And I guess she figured she'd lost everything else. She can't lose her life too, because she even said she lost her home, she lost her job, she lost everything, and she had to start all over again. So she went cold turkey. It was the hardest thing she said she ever had to do. And when they close out on her scene, she says that the big companies, they always pay their way out of trouble, which is sad because ultimately that is what they end up doing, is paying their way to get out of trouble. But the videos, and then one man had actually passed away from an overdose. So everyone in these videos are addicted. And then the lack of, again, Richard Sackler's accountability, or any accountability, or the lack of, that he took, he eventually does realize that the Virginia attorneys are investigating him, and they do have some incriminating things against him that put him at risk personally. So he eventually does resign from Purdue Pharma, um, as the president, and then, or he resigns as the president of Purdue, and then he appointed his CEO Michael Friedman in his stead. And as far as Richard Sackler, and I hate even talking about him because just how horrible of a human being he is. And I know you shouldn't judge people, but like I said, all the lives and the turmoil, the continuous suffering that the opioid effect, or opioid crisis, has had on our country. Um, he, from all accounts, is fine. He had to relinquish some assets to pay settlements, and he's paid families back who have been victims of the opioid crisis, who have like lost relatives and those personally affected. But he's out here just like living his life. Like there was no legal ramifications for anything that he has done. But just it just goes to show how far greediness will make you do things that you most people would think that that's wrong. I shouldn't exploit people like that. But money makes people do horrible things. The level of just the pushiness of Purdue. So they even went to the extent of, and I actually remember these when I worked in the medical field, the pain level charts where it showed like the face and like the numbers 1 through 10, how severe your pain was. But they also tried to push a narrative of pain as a fifth vital sign. So the four vital signs are blood pressure, heart rate, respirations, and your body temperature. But they try to incorporate pain as a vital sign, and then that is how they would adjust or decide if you, well, not if, they're giving you Oxycontin, just what dosage you are getting. Their marketing, they use other family physicians to push that these were safe prescriptions to prescribe to your regular family care patients, which usually medications like this should be monitored under some type of neurologist or some type of pain management physician to avoid any issues as far as addiction. Um, as far as other claims they made, deceptive claims that it had a low risk of addiction and that it was extended release. But again, people were crushing it up. They figured out how to get past that extended release. Um, let's see. And then again, the 80 milligram dose, which it was the highest concentrated amount. I wanted to make sure, but yeah, they said that the 80 milligram Oxycontin was the highest dosage that ended up being prescribed. But again, by the time they had did that, it was too late. Um, and again, when they had family physicians speaking at these conferences to push Oxycontin, they had physicians as, for example, this Russell Pointnoy, who and he was a prominent American pain specialist and a palliative care physician. So he was paid at a ridiculous amount of money, and he ended up making a now controversial claim that Oxycontin was safe and that family physicians shouldn't fear prescribing it and that it was safe. And to this day, like from what I've researched, he has not faced any legal consequences. He's had to like answer in court as far as for his actions, but as far as steep consequences, I don't see anyone that has, as far as that was higher up. Now, all the pill mills and all of the illegal activity, the and I wouldn't say lower level, but the regular people have suffered consequences of the actions of the Sackler family who created this poison, and now we have millions of deaths. Now, the exact number isn't known, but over a billion people since 1999 have died of an opioid related death. And then Pharma and the Sackler family, the settlement is valued at approximately $7.4 million. The agreement that was in effect on May 1st, 2026, it requires the Sackler family to pay roughly $6.5 billion over 15 years, with Purdue contributing an additional $900 million. Again, I think it's a good watch if you want something to binge in a day. It's definitely will do that. And it's a very educational and very entertaining limited series. And we definitely should watch. I almost like, not to, go into a whole soapbox about it, but I almost feel like it is, and I plan on when my child is older showing her this because it is very educational and it is very important for us to learn about the mistakes of the past and just how simply you think you're taking medicine and your doctor's prescribing it and it's supposed to help you, and it ends up fueling a addiction. And I think these are important things to know going into adulthood. And it's just fascinating to see the background and how this epidemic started. And I like the Hulu, well, not version. I like Dopesick on Hulu more so than I do Painkiller, just because I felt like it was more realistic, and I felt like there's some comedic moments in Painkiller, and I think for such a serious subject and for respect of all the people that there shouldn't be comedic moments. But what I did like about Painkiller is that the intro of every episode, they have a relative of someone who has been lost to the opioid crisis, and they get to say their name just to give them some, what would be the right word? Just to respect them and know that their death was not in vain. And like I said, it's older, it's not brand new, but if you're looking for something, go watch it. Bye.